Hi, I'm Nancy. Thanks for checking out my channel, A Square Pillow Isn't Square, the place where you will learn anything and everything you ever wanted to know about home deck sewing. One of the most important elements found in professional looking draperies and other window treatments is that you're not able to see any visible stitching on the hems. Being able to see the stitching line on side hems and bottom hems in particular are a key factor in determining whether a treatment is homemade or professionally made. There's 3 ways to get a super professional look to your hems, and today we're going to find out what they are as well as the pros and cons of each method.
The first way I'm going to show you is on a household sewing machine. Here we have my little Juki household sewing machine, and as you can see, it doesn't have a lot of stitches, but it does have stitch number 14. There it is. That is my blind hem stitch. So I'm going to show you how to do a blind hem on a household sewing machine. This is a foot that's going to, it comes with almost all sewing machines now, and it's called a blind hem foot, blind hemming foot. And it is the foot that you use when you're doing this particular stitch. And as you can see, what makes it special is it's got a little edge guide here that we're going to use to line up our hem edge to. And it also has some width to it because there's sort of a zigzag effect that goes into the stitch. So I'm going to put this on here. Now, sewing machines like this are designed for blind hemming primarily on clothing, where you don't have a lot of thickness and a lot of layers. The pros of this particular stitch and doing it this way is that most people today will have a sewing machine that does this stitch, so you don't need any special equipment. The con is that you're really going to be limited. This particular lightweight cotton sateen with a very average weight lining is pretty much going to be the maximum weight that I'm going to be able to do this stitch on a household machine. So that is one of the limitations, one of the drawbacks of doing it this way. And the way that it's done is you start with your standard hem, double hem, just like we would normally do, which in this case is about a double 1.5 inch turned hem onto my lining. When you're doing this stitch, you have to then fold your hem back towards the front of the drapery. You're going to leave yourself maybe 1/8 of an inch exposed on the back of this fold. And this black edge guide here is going to run along the folded edge of the lining, like so. The nice thing is it's really easy to do on lightweight fabrics like this, and this edge guide makes it super simple to sew straight. When you open it up, this is what it looks like on the inside of your drapery. Let me get my thread snips here. And I'm using a contrasting thread here just to make it easier to see. You would normally obviously use a color match thread. And what you'll see on the front of the drapery are very, very small little tacks at each point where this little V caught. You will have a little tack. And that is the blind hem effect, which looks like a really nice commercial blind hemmer. And it works really great. The disadvantage is that you're going to be really limited to the fabrics that you can do. As I said again, I've got this sewing machine set on the maximum stitch length and the maximum width that I can possibly do to catch this thread. And the problem is that if you have heavier fabric where these folds are a lot thicker and there's a lot more bulk, this little stitch right here just doesn't reach far enough to catch all the layers of fabric. It might catch your lining, but it won't catch the face fabric that's folded in there. And what will happen is your stitches will skip. And you can even see on here, there's a stitch here that barely caught. And there's a stitch down here that's quite large. And that inconsistency is as good as it's going to get on drapery weight fabric. So that's a disadvantage. Another disadvantage is by the nature of the way that it's done, where you're stitching on this fold here. When you open your drapery up, there's a pretty obvious crease line right here. Now you can press that out, but it's still not quite as good as not having to put a folded crease in your drapery like that. But that's a pretty good way to do it if you've just got a household machine and a lightweight fabric, or an unlined fabric. It'll work really well too. Okay, the second way that I'm going to show you to do drapery hems is on a blind hemming machine. This machine is designed to only do one thing. You can use it on clothing as well as drapery, and it's a super versatile machine. This one is a portable blind hemmer. They also come, you can also get an industrial blind hemmer, which comes in a big table with a motor, but those are mostly for really heavy use in factories or in drapery shops. But if you're considering going into a business doing this, you'll absolutely want to invest in a blind hemmer, and I will show you how that one works. So what makes a blind hemmer special is that it has a curved needle, and that needle comes under, it scoops under the fabric. It goes down through the top and scoops a little bit of the face fabric and makes a sort of like a daisy chain, an overlock stitch along the edge of the seam. The needle goes through the little looper there, creates like a little lazy daisy stitch, and it catches my fabric. Comes back up and goes around the looper again. The needle feeds through the loop and it makes another stitch. And that is the method by which it makes the stitch. So the nice thing about this is it's super fast, super easy, really easy to adjust. And when you're done, you have this, I probably could tighten my thread tension a little bit here, but you have a very professional looking blind hem stitch on the back, which again, I'm using blue for contrast. If it was color matched, it would look really nice. And on the front, you have a very tiny little tack keeping your layers together. Very consistent, very professional. And again, if this was in ivory thread, you wouldn't even be able to see it. The other nice thing is that it requires no pressing or ironing. It's just ready to go. The third way of doing the hems on your drapery is by hand. So the pros and cons of doing it by hand are, the pros is that you have ultimate control over your stitch spacing, your stitch tension, how much thread shows through the face fabric. You just have a lot of control. Another pro is that you don't need any special sewing machines or equipment. And the con, of course, is that doing it by hand takes the longest amount of time. But you're only going to make these once, so if you got to invest a little time to do it right and you don't have any special equipment, it's totally worth it. So let me show you how to sew your draperies closed by hand. You simply take a single ply of a good quality thread with a knot at the end. You will start at one end, take a little tuck on the fold, and what you'll do is make sure that you just catch all the layers of the fabric. You want to catch the lining and the face fabric on your little tack, and you will simply move forward. I'd say maybe I've gone 3/4 of an inch, and catch your fold. and do it again. See that little tack? If you feel like you can go farther between tacks, go for it. And tie it off. And I like to tuck my thread inside so I don't have any visible tails. Here you go. Isn't that beautiful? Again, that's with green thread, so you can imagine how nice that is with color matched thread. And that is our hand sewn, beautiful drapery seam. In review, option number 1 is the blind hem stitch on a household sewing machine. The pros are that this stitch is available on almost all sewing machines now. Another pro is that it's a time-saving stitch over hand sewing your draperies. And it's also a good option if you have a lightweight fabric or you're making unlined draperies. The cons of this stitch are that there are some inconsistency issues with it. There's also really limited adjustments you can make on the sewing machine to get this stitch to work on different weights and thicknesses of fabric. Option 2, doing your hems on a blind hemmer. The pros of this are obviously a very professional, very fast, very consistent looking result. It'll also work on all different weights of fabric, and you can also use it for clothing. The only con with this option is that you have to buy a sewing machine to do this stitch. And option number 3, hand sewing your drapery hems. The pros here are that you get the most invisible, most consistent stitch that you can get over any other method. You also have to buy no special equipment, you just need a needle and thread. The con here is that this is by far the most time-consuming method. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please hit that subscribe button, comment below, or give me a thumbs up. I'd love to hear your comments or questions. Thank you so much for watching, and happy sewing.